The judge in the trial of the reputed New York mob boss John Gotti has sequestered the jury now because of alleged jury tampering in some early Gotti trials. The current trial is expected to last up to 3 months. Gotti is the latest alleged mafia figure to face trial on charges of racketeering. Since the mid-1980s, the mafia has been under increased attack by federal authorities. And as we continue our series on organized crime, CNN's Charles Feldman looks at how the fight is going.
In the war against organized crime, is the mob on the run?
They haven't wiped out the mob. Law enforcement hasn't wiped out the mob, and it's not the twilight of the dons. That being said, I think it has to be recognized that organized crime, as a consequence of all of these prosecutions that we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, is or has been seriously damaged.
In fact, since 1981, 20 mafia bosses from 16 different families have been convicted. And the FBI says that in the near future, it may strike a blow at the mob's vital financial underbelly.
I believe right now we're right on the edge of identifying certain Cosa Nostra members who have always kept a very low profile in their family and have been involved in making millions and millions of dollars in money or handling the money for the various families. And they've been forced to take over positions of importance in the family. And when we take them out, we're going to be hitting the family very hard on their financial assets.
For most of the early part of this century, the government had very little luck battling organized crime. Its luck changed when Congress in 1969 passed the law with the long name of Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act and the short nickname RICO.
What RICO does is it targets not just an individual act of criminality, but an enterprise or a group that's engaged in multiple acts of racketeering. And those acts can be homicide, mail fraud, securities fraud, trafficking in stolen property.
Armed with RICO, prosecutors in the mid-1980s went to court and proved both the existence of a national ruling commission of the mafia and a heroin trade link between the Sicilian mafia and its U.S. counterpart, La Cosa Nostra, a link that used pizza parlors in the United States to help process the drug. While RICO has been embraced by prosecutors, some defense lawyers say it should be abolished.
I think it's something to be feared. What it does is reduce the prosecutor's burden to really prove somebody guilty, and it allows them to put together a tremendous amount of evidence which may or may not be related, and by the weight of that evidence, press the defendant down and convict him.
One of the government's biggest victories so far against organized crime has been its success, at least to a degree, in freeing the Teamsters union from what the government claimed was the iron grip of the mafia. The union's last election was actually supervised by the government, and the union's new president is said to be one of the first untainted by ties to the mob. This was accomplished by a court settlement brought about by RICO.
I think what's going on with the Teamsters now is a tremendous example of how we can combine use of prison sentences and use of civil racketeering trusteeships to really begin to free a powerful labor institution from what was decades of control by mafia figures.
In what seems like a paradox, authorities say this bloodshed in Brooklyn, the result of the mob war, is actually a sign that the mafia is seriously weakened. With so many senior bosses off the streets and behind bars, lower-level soldiers are shooting it out for control of at least one mob empire. While the mafia may be wounded, the government says it is forming new alliances with so-called emerging organized crime groups from South America and even from the former Soviet Union. These dangerous liaisons mean that while the American La Cosa Nostra may be down, don't yet count it out. Charles Feldman, CNN, New York.
In New York, the curtain goes up this week on the murder racketeering trial of John Gotti. But Charles Feldman tells us the courtroom will be more like a stage.
This may look like the exterior of a federal courthouse in Brooklyn, but in some ways it's been more like a theater, some say of the absurd, playing host to the latest trial of John Gotti, self-proclaimed plumbing salesman and reputed godfather of a powerful mafia family. Thus far, the judge has lashed out at reporters, and reporters have lashed out right back at the judge. Gotti has verbally attacked both the judge and the prosecutor. His remarks picked up by every newspaper and television station in New York City. And now, some reporters charge the judge is conducting portions of the trial behind closed doors.
A lot of us are upset that a lot of the things the judge has done with regard to the jury have been conducted in secret, in chambers, where the press hasn't been notified what business was taking place in court.
We can't show you pictures of potential jurors, and when the trial actually gets underway, we won't be able to even show you artist sketches of what they look like. In fact, you'll be seeing a lot of pictures of the outside of the court, much like this one. The reason? Jurors will be kept in a hotel for the entire length of the trial, their names and addresses kept secret. The judge says this is to protect them from the press. The press says it is to protect them from jury tampering. Some defense lawyers say it is to rig the trial so that the government can win.
Well, it creates a jury which is afraid, creates a jury which thinks it's being protected against dangerous men.
The theatrics of this event heightened when the judge threatened to move the trial to another city, and Gotti, with the judge out of the room, called him a name considered a homosexual slur. If the judge had a suitable reply, we don't know. Unlike Gotti, he won't talk with reporters. Charles Feldman, CNN, New York.
Underway in New York City. The John Gotti trial has all the ingredients of really a Martin Scorsese movie, and they are an alleged crime boss accused of racketeering and murder, hours of incriminating wiretap evidence, a key prosecution witness who has himself been involved in some 19 murders, and the drama is now playing in and around the Brooklyn County Courthouse, where right now standing by is New York Newsday Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Jimmy Breslin. And good morning, Jimmy.
Good morning, Joan. And I listened with interest to your introduction, and I would respectfully disagree. I think this is the trial that will kill gangster movies in America. And I'll
really?
explain. Yes, absolutely.
The real thing is better, huh?
The real thing is dreadfully boring and frightfully small and not worth your interest, really. Upstairs here, Joan, on the 4th floor, we have the trial of John Gotti, the new Capone, the new Torrio, the great boss of the mafia, as it's known. But if you go just to the other side of this court building, it begins the borough of Brooklyn in the city of New York. And you run for miles and miles of streets. Starting directly here are people living in overwhelming sadness, in great difficulty, without much hope. Women mostly with small children fighting life. If you were to take a list of the things that matter in the borough of Brooklyn and keep an accurate list, you would have no room at the bottom for the name of John Gotti, because no matter what happens to him in this trial, he can be convicted. It will not change one breath of living in the borough of Brooklyn. However, in the world of the media where we reside, media being the plural of mediocre, he's tremendously important for entertainment. Magnificent. We can have the press, the FBI. They need jobs, these agents. There's no more Russian spies to follow. They follow John Gotti. You have the judge can emote, the prosecutor can accuse, and the lawyer can defend. It's a great, it's a great scene. And you could have some side things that do give you some joy, such as Mr. Gotti in the first row. As he enters, there are 8 people from his organization in the first row, and they stand. And they remain standing until John Gotti sits at the defense table. Then they sit. However, I have a complaint about them. Their appearance yesterday was hardly in keeping with the Gotti group in crime. They're usually much better dressed. I thought these people were a little bit in disarray, and I didn't like it, and I think it should be changed.
Well, it seems, Jimmy, that things have kind of slipped away in the whole organized crime family as police have really made inroads. However, they don't call this guy Teflon Don for nothing, because he's gotten off 3 times. 3 times up, 3 times he's gotten off. A lot of people say that the jurors are afraid of vengeance by the mob, and they aren't going to get him. Do they have a better case this time?
He had 3 times he got away, and the cases were very poor, and he should have got away. Should have been allowed out. In fact, I think that's the danger, that we begin to sacrifice our rights in the quest to put this one fellow in jail. I'm more concerned about my own liberties than I am about John Gotti's. I don't care much for Mr. Gotti. I don't think.
But these aren't insignificant charges, Jimmy. I mean, we're talking about 5 different murder charges here.
No, 18 They murdered. They murdered 19 fellows.
Total, sure.
Yeah, probably a lot more. I mean, we've got to give them credit where credit is due.
Well, is this
I think they killed more than 19 people.
Is this prosecution witness going to be any good? I mean, because he's been involved in so many murders himself.
Mr. Gravano is a genius, and I don't know what he's got to say. I know I would rather have him as a witness against me than sitting alongside me as a co-defendant.
We're going to get back to you, Jimmy, as this whole thing unfolds. We'll see the real life mob.
Well, there is one. I'd like to say one thing to the lawyer.
Sorry, Jimmy, I got to jump out here because I'm up against the clock, against a time problem. But we'll be back with you. We'll check
back.
About
English grammar.
Okay, I got to jump out, Jimmy. Sorry. We'll be back in just a moment.